You're the one that came up with the fundamental breakthrough in deep learning that's led to where AI is today. You've won the Nobel Prize in physics, and you're professor emeritus at the University of Toronto.
I believe they're already conscious, yes, but I don't talk about that much because that puts people off from the other safety messages. We have a very funny model of consciousness that I think is just wrong. I think the model we have of the mind and of what consciousness is at present, because we're making these new beings, is going to completely change our view of what people are.
That was Alex Kantrovitz on the latest Big Technology podcast, something that if you're interested in technology, I highly recommend. Speaking with, the godfather of AI, really, Sir Geoffrey Hinton. Now, he's the man who discovered or worked out a thing called backpropagation, and he got a Nobel Prize for this because it's at the heart of all the machine learning that's brought us the AI we have nowadays. And this is a man who's now telling us that our chatbots are conscious. They are aware. They are thinking, self-aware beings. This is very interesting. His arguments seem to be that, because they reply to you in ways that show that they understand what you're talking about, you cannot have understanding without consciousness. But I don't think that's true. I've worked with AI now for many years, and I would say that while Sir Geoffrey is on the right lines, and AI very likely will become conscious, in my view, it's not there yet. I don't think so. And what happens is you have a set of weights, more and more weights in all the new models as we improve them and we train them with more and more world data, and in particular reasoning data, coding data, things that are aspects of intelligence rather than knowledge. But those are in a set of weights and they don't move. That's different from a human brain. The human brain has neuroplasticity and neurons, and the pathways change as we learn and think. So that plasticity is possibly something that helps us towards having what we call consciousness. The AIs don't have that, but what they do have is they have context. This is the current chat that you're in at any one time, or the project that your AI is coding for you. And in that context, the AI is able to give responses and say things that within which it builds up a kind of worldview of that particular conversation. Now, the way this works is, of course, we know prediction, and people say, oh, that's autocorrect. I think prediction is the wrong word. What LLMs do is they do token reasoning, because they consider a vast number of things using attention heads. And then they come up with, token by token, they come up with sentences and paragraphs and whole essays, in fact, if you want. That's not auto prediction. That is actually reasoning going on there. So Hinton is correct there. These AIs do reason, they can reason. But I would argue that you don't need a reasoner to have reason. You don't need an understander to have understanding. These are things that stand alone. They're based on coherence. If you have a number of statements connected with each other, they can make sense internally. And that's what an AI uses, is the sense that it's able to pull out from, let's say, a graph of lots of connected nodes. And then it can respond in a way that sounds highly intelligent. And in actual fact, it is intelligent, but there's no intelligence behind it. There's a mechanism of reasoning. There's no self. There's no consciousness yet. Although I would say that perhaps I'm being a bit harsh here. At the point where an LLM makes its prediction, or as I would call it, issues its next reasoning token, that very point actually happens to be the now. It's the transition between possible futures and what is fixed in the past. This seems to be what humans experience as isness, which is at the seat of all consciousness. It's the prediction, it's the collapse. It sounds a little bit quantum, doesn't it? The collapse, where we collapse a wave particle duality down. It's not the same as that, but you can imagine that in a way you're collapsing the future into the past. And at the point that you do it, that mechanism could have a spark of consciousness about it. And that could be what Sir Geoffrey is talking about. There's elements, sparks, flashes of consciousness, which then feed into the context. of the current conversation or the task that is underway. And so I'd say maybe that could be a case. But what you really need, in my opinion, for consciousness is a loop. Douglas Hofstadter called it a strange loop. You need to have the loop go round and round and round, taking in information, taking input, processing it, handling it, considering over it, and keeping that going. And that, I think, is what you and I would mostly call is our sense of being alive, of our consciousness. We persist, we continue, and we learn. And it's a process, it's a flow. Whereas an AI comes in bits and pieces. There's a response, then a response, then a response. But that's not to say that those bunches of responses don't have some consciousness in them, perhaps, in the same way as when we watch a movie at 24 frames a second. Those are slices, 24 slices, but brought together fast enough, they seem to give us some kind of conscious flow. In the same way, for an LLM, all the different responses that it gives you in a context, the gaps between, the LLM is not aware of. It just isn't there. So it doesn't perceive the gaps. And therefore, it does have its own sense of persistence in a way, but only through the context. Take the context away, and the LLM has no, well, maybe the tiniest spark of awareness at each predictive or reasoning token that is emitted, but no flow. So I would say Geoffrey Hinton is possibly talking about that. But the technology is not there yet, in my view. I think it's coming. I think persistent reasoning models are just around the corner. They will be in a kind of loop, and they'll be in kind of like a duplex mode, which means that you talk to it while it talks to you, and the flow continues. So you're both present at the same time. At that point, I might say to Mr. Hinton, I think I agree with you. It has been achieved. But at the moment, I'd say there's little sparks, and it's a bit too early, in my view, to say that our chatbots are conscious. What do you think about that, though? What's your experience been with your chatbot or with your coding agent or your personal assistant or however you use AIs? Do you have a sense that there is something it is to be an AI that they experience? Or do you think it's just all mechanistic and it's like a game of billiards? You know, you hit all the balls and you just watch where they go, and where they go is where they have to go, because that's just physics and cause and effect. Where do you sit on this fence?